Hi pals, it is me again, RT, they them pronouns only. I have left all of the fans on, BRB. Please ignore my slightly flushed face. This has only just happened, I don't know why, but I'm also wearing a shirt to cover up my burns from the weekend. Hopefully this will just go away. I don't have the energy to do this again. And so yes, I'm trying to hide bites and burns from my weekend doing a lot of gardening based activities. I was wearing sun cream. The sun caught me in the patches where we must have missed, because yeah, here's one of them. And then here's the other. And I have some on my arms too, so this is why I tell people sun cream works, because I always manage to get burnt in the places where I missed, and the rest of me is absolutely perfectly fine. Those sections are fucked though. Always happens. There's always something every year, even when someone else applies it for me. But anyway, so I am just going to do like a mid-year reading wrap up, because I haven't really talked about books too much recently. But yeah, so I've done a pretty large amount of reading so far this year. I think I'm at 32 books out of my 50 goal for 2022. Yeah, we'll see how that goes. I go through ebbs and flows really, of sometimes I'll be reading loads and loads and loads, other times less so. A lot of my recent reads have all been by audiobook, which has saved my life. I've been using the Libby app recently, and I've signed up to 2 libraries, one in my local area and one like where my mum's partner lives, because well, why not? They do have like a slightly different selection. It has been really helpful for my reading numbers. So I thought I'd go through and tell you what I've read and what I thought of them all. So I'm just going to lump these books together. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 of these books are from the Pretty Little Liars book series. Mainly it's the second season, but then also the last book of the first season. They were a pretty interesting and fun ride. I watched, I think, How to Train Your Gavin. I watched his video of reading all of them, and I was like, yeah, I do not regret stopping at the end of the second series, because it had a really good rounded off ending. Did not need to read any further. So if you ask me, the first 8 books are the only books that exist in the Pretty Little Liars universe, okay? They're different enough from the TV series that it wasn't boring, but you could also see where they've kind of plucked ideas from the original text for the TV show, which is something I enjoy. Then I read my friend's poetry book, From the Brighter Side of 25, Poems About Youth, Love and Rebellion by Ashley O'Connor. I bought the ebook edition on Amazon, you know, pretty affordable. I feel like the poetry in the book is very reflective of her as a writer and a person. So if you're kind of emo, kind of goth, like a lot of music, enjoy like gothic literature, vampires, pirates, and you're kind of queer, you should check it out. Then there's a few books on here from NetGalley. Fear Book Club was an interesting one. Graphic novel. Then we had Sorceline, which I enjoyed, but I absolutely hated the fact that on NetGalley it was black and white but inverted, so it was really difficult to fucking read. Same goes for the Enola Holmes graphic novel as well. They all had really cute art styles though, which is what intrigued me to them. Oh my god. They all have a little bit of like a mystery vibe. I think Fear Book Club and Sorceline were more on the paranormal side of things. Then I also read another one of the Harlequin Eat Bang Kill Tour comics. I think I have another couple left to read, so at some point I'll have to like look that up and see where I actually left off, because I don't remember. That must have been the last one I've read though. Then I listened to The Hunger Games. Again, I listened to it on the Spotify app actually, but you can also get it on Libby if the library you are linked with has it. I won't go into Hunger Games, but it's a vibe. I definitely have that weird like don't want to finish a series feeling with Hunger Games, even though it's such an old book series. So I've read the first book twice now, the second book once, and I still haven't read the third book. So I have no idea what's going on. Then there's a few more NetGalley books that I did not enjoy. They were not great. One of them is Gender Pioneers, which sounded... Oh wait, was this one I did enjoy? Sort of. It was okay. Gender Pioneers was okay. I felt like a lot of the art was ugly. Sorry. Basically, people in history who are kind of gender non-conforming, and a bit about them. I think there were just kind of like a lot of iffy language used in places. So I had questions, but it was a short book, non-fiction. Then there's Plain Bad Heroines, which is probably one of the worst reads of my year. It's like a 600-page gothic novel with 2 different plot lines, timelines, alternate universe vibes, where I think they should have just been 2 separate books for a start, and that would have at least improved the reading experience I had. Because you're trying to keep up with so many characters split over these 2 different timelines, and I think they were also such like vastly different vibes for gothic horror that I don't think there are many readers who would enjoy this, because one of them is like a pretty classic gothic horror type of like plot, writing, characters. I can't remember what the date was, because honestly it was so much work trying to read this book that I have immediately blanked a lot of it. Like, it sounded interesting from the, like, I don't know, blurb, description, whatever it is. That's why I picked it up. But oh my god, I really wish there was more of a obvious indicator of how long some of these books are, because I would not have picked this up if I knew it was a 600-page book. Like, but yeah, one of them is that classic sort of vibe of, you know, a boarding school for girls in some kind of olden time. Can't remember if it was 1900s or like 1920, something like that. Then there was one that was modern day Hollywood. And then also, like, I didn't even finish reading it, but I have added it to my like finished list because it's so big that I'm not allowing that time I've wasted reading that book to not count towards my year. So if you have problems with that, leave. So yeah, I ended up looking through the ratings of other people who have read the book and seeing that like 50% of people loved it, and then 50% of people were in the same sort of boat as me, being like, what the fuck is going on? Basically, I found out that none of the plot lines developed actually end with anything. Like, the timelines apparently didn't have any connection at all. So I was just like, you know, if this is not going to pay off in any way, then I'm just going to stop. So yeah, I think if it was split into 2 separate books, I might have really enjoyed them separately, because then as well, it doesn't necessarily have to have that connection between the 2 different timelines. But I feel like when they're both in the same book and you're alternating chapters between them. I also didn't fucking like any of the modern day characters. I just could not stand any of the characters, so that didn't help either. You know, I read plenty of books where I don't like the characters very much, but there's got to be some kind of redeeming qualities, or like at least one character that I enjoy, and there just weren't any. They all sucked, sorry. Then I read the book of Nonbinary Joy. So this I finished reading before it came out, so I don't know if anything has changed, but I was not impressed. I've noticed this kind of marketing, publishing kind of like theme going on for quite a while, that I don't know whether it's a small publishers or one particular publisher, or if it's just specifically the UK, but I have noticed it here, that like minor queer and trans celebrities, you know, like internet influencers or creators and stuff like that, are asked to do like non-fiction books. Some of them are really great, like Queer Body Power was a really good one. You could see that Essie put a lot of work into the research around it as well, did not just show their own point of view, included other people's voices, blah blah blah, you know. But like there's a few that I've picked up that won't all be included on here because I did DNF quite a lot of them, where it just feels lazily put together and kind of relying entirely on the fact that the person or people involved have online platforms. So there's one that's not going to be on this list because I DNF'd it very quickly, and it was a very short non-fiction book, but it was kind of just, it was like podcast transcripts. It was just kind of like magazine interview vibes for the entire book with different people, and it was just so innately boring. Like, I don't pick up a book to read a podcast transcripts or magazine interviews. That's what I go to podcasts and magazines for. You know, they just didn't do anything with the interview. None of them had a point. They were just talking about stuff. Whereas I think other books have done this sort of collective thing better, like Amelia Abrams has written 2 really great non-fiction, like queer books that I kind of compare a lot of these things to, mainly because one of them is kind of like that TV show Gaycation that Elliot Page was briefly doing with his friend years ago, where Amelia was like interviewing different queer people around the world, but they all kind of had a specific theme, but also you were kind of brought into that life and what it's like in that place as well. Or her other book was a book of personal essays, basically. So she was the editor mainly of the books, of that book, where each person had a thing that they wanted to talk about, mainly of their experience of being queer or trans. So it was all mainly that individual person's voice, and that wasn't all writers either. It was also like pop stars. I'm totally blanking on who else was in this, but yeah, you know, other people with platforms. But that book before that I was talking about just kind of didn't have any of these things that made it special. It just was like anything else that you can find on the internet for free. Like, I feel like if you're paying for content, then there needs to be some more work and value put into it. So that's kind of as well how I felt about the book of Nonbinary Joy. It felt okay, it's very difficult to specify. I'll see if I can look at what I wrote originally, but also I was not the only one who felt this way. There are a lot of other reviews. I am a reader and a reviewer who is aware that I'm not always the target audience. So I don't make critique or criticisms as much as possible that show that these, specifically books in this instance, were not made for people like me, you know, whether it's age range or what. So, you know, I read a lot of YA, and actually I appreciate when YA characters act like teenagers, which I see a lot of like ridiculous people saying the opposite online. It's like, well, if you want adult characters, you are in the wrong setting. So I came into this knowing that this was not really for me now, but might have been for me a few years ago, closer to when I had first come out or was about to come out as non-binary. Like my review on Goodreads, I've said like this could be a great book for people new to the idea that they may be trans or non-binary, as well as helpful for a lot of allies, though it isn't written for them. There are a lot of sentences that just don't make a lot of sense. It's very limited. It's a very limited point of view and misses a lot of intersectional points that are important to make, including masc presenting non-binary people, BIPOC, disabled people, etc., which I think is what Queer Body Power did well, is that it was a much more intersectional view of all the topics explored. Whereas this felt like the author just wrote from their point of view with no aim or decision to make it inclusive of other non-binary people, but just slap non-binary on the cover as if it's suitable for everybody. It just kind of didn't even try to be more inclusive. Didn't even say this book is not suitable for all, you know, there was no like disclaimer. In the microaggressions section, there were 2 examples that were the same, but about different isms and phobias. So they were the same example, but one was racist and one was homophobic. And I think it's like, that was a nitpicky one, but I think it would have been more useful to have different like examples. And I quoted here, the body positive movement and its messages, which were created by powerful Black and POC women. As an editor, that enraged me a lot, so I hope someone's fixed it. But Black and people of colour women? Yeah, so I suggested saying Black women and women of colour, and to avoid shortening acronyms, as people may not know what these acronyms are, because this does seem like a very like intro to kind of book rather than like a advanced learning. So if you're going to use acronyms, you need to say what they mean, because I feel like this would have been much more appropriate for teenagers and maybe people in their 20s, even though I think a book like this would be beneficial for anyone who might be coming out at any point, minus the tone. The tone was also awful, that other people mentioned a lot. And also that's all it said. It didn't go into any history at all, briefly or otherwise. So it just felt kind of lazily put together. There was no real nod to where any of this stuff actually started. Just a very brief Black and POC women. Can you tell this book was written by a white person? I can. There's another quote here that says, I really appreciate that you may have never met anyone who uses they them pronouns before, and this may feel new or alien to you. I use they them pronouns and I deserve you to respect this. Is something that they use as like a script for people coming out. Doesn't actually make sense. So something that's easier to fucking say would be good. Soul food in itself, I think, is erring into stuff that's not for white people to be using in a queer way. Someone can correct me, of course, because I have no idea, but I just said, you know, you could just change it to food for the soul. You don't have to say it as soul food, because I don't think white people have soul food, but you know. Then the fashion and makeup, style and hair section, mainly only catered to femme presenting non-binary people. There was nothing for masc or fluid or androgynous people at all. Also, all the recommended brands in that section are expensive and only for femme presenting people. Yeah, you know, just another one of those moments where it's just like, this is coming from a very specific voice, supposedly for everyone in the non-binary community. And then also, like, yeah, my quote, like, I just think there was no mention of secondhand shopping or DIYing clothes or like hair. There was nothing about hairstyles. That was the thing that got me. There was nothing about hairstyles. So yeah, like there was just so much lacking in that section. Kids, this is toxic behavior, ages the book quite a bit. So obviously that's speaking to the reader, and here the reader is supposedly children or, you know, teenagers. So it's very confusing because it kind of can't decide where or who the audience actually is, but makes decisions of who the audience is at random points. So like this one was the kids, this is toxic behavior. But there's also other places where there's like certain language used that I don't even know what it means without Googling it myself, and I'm 27. So it just, there was no kind of a consistent idea of who the audience is supposed to be. And the idea of mutually beneficial relationships makes them sound like a transaction rather than an actual friendship, Like, you know, again, I just feel like this person doesn't really know what they're talking about when it comes to radical queering relationships, and questioning heteronormative dynamics in relationships. There's also a bullet point that was minimizing self-diagnosis and was like really shitting on people self-diagnosing without any kind of like reflection on why that might be necessary, and just sort of calls self-diagnosing taking a bunch of quizzes, which is not what self-diagnosis is. So really ill-informed, very ableist, very sanist as well. You know, self-diagnosis is widely accepted among disabled activists due to many factors that make official diagnosis out of reach for many people. So I recommended removing that and doing more research themselves into these things. So again, can you guess the person writing this is not actually in many activist circles? Because yeah, and then my final like paragraph was that unfortunately this book frustrated me more the further I read, and I was reading this with the audience in mind, but it kept changing anyway. But I do know that I'm not the audience. I'm along I've been out, we're nearly at 10 years, like I think I'm about 8 years I've been out. So I know this is not for me, but I was reading it from a perspective of, you know, if I like was in the first year or so of coming out, or was sort of thinking about it. But yeah, lacking intersectionality, basically no context for most things, you know, especially when newly out or people trying to discover a lot of things about themselves. They may have not had the same kind of exposure to queer and disabled history generally, and activism. So this would have been a really beneficial book to introduce readers new to those communities to these kinds of concepts, and possibly given some like further reading suggestions. And that also could have been beneficial for allies, family, friends of non-binary people too. And I just completely missed it, really. Oh my god, hello. Yeah, just completely missed the mark, which is why I think generally this trend of social media people being given non-fiction books is kind of getting to the point where it's like really unhelpful and actually kind of might be a little bit dangerous in some aspects, because it's just spreading more misinformed opinions. But like I've said, I've read some really great research and reflective books from social media people. Queer Body Power by Essie was amazing. I always bring up Melanie Murphy's Fully Functioning Human Almost, and there are other ones as well that I've read and thought were really good. But like, I have seen this as being a trend of lots of social media people being given these publishing deals to talk about stuff that they don't seem to know shit all about, and then can't be asked to actually do any of the work to put something actually helpful out there. So for now, I'm putting a pause on my queer non-fiction reading because it's all just becoming the same kind of thing. Anyway, moving on, positive things again. I finally read The Black Flamingo. It was a really great book, and I included that in my like YA books that healed my inner child, because it was actually just really lovely to read. And I definitely think we are lacking a lot of British black queer stories, but also other POC stories as well within the queer community. But yeah, there was so much explored in that book that I just really enjoyed it, and I highly recommend you read it. It's many pages, like 300 or something, but it's really fast to read because it's in verse. So and also it's not as daunting as you might think it is. That's what I thought, and that's what put me off reading it for fucking ages. I then read The Hate List, which is quite an old book about a school shooter, basically. I only listened to it because I just have this visceral memory of it being all over social media back in like Tumblr days. I don't know why. And this was when I was first starting to use Libby. And this was one of the first books that I saw come up somehow. You know, I don't really have many opinions or thoughts on that one, because as someone who lives in the UK, don't really have school shootings, and it kind of goes down the route of
he was bullied by people for being weird, and it pushed him over the edge,
rather than
he was brought up by right-winged family members who encouraged the use of weapons as a way to solve your problems, and people did not like him because he was very obviously far right and was really awful to people, and hate crime them at school all day.
You know, that's my main thought on that, because it's also the thought I had when Casualty had a school shooting plotline recently. That was really bad. That was not good. Those 2 episodes were not well written. That was bad. But anyway, I then listened to Noughts and Crosses. I also didn't like that very much. There were a lot of things that just made me question what the fuck was happening. Couldn't really tell if it was meant to be like an everyday vibe or like a kind of alternate universe vibe, because some of the setup felt like alternate universe, but then a lot of the times they had things like phones or I don't know that felt a bit too real worldy. So there was like a weird divide for me of like what world they were existing in. And also like this 14-year-old girl becomes an alcoholic within like 2 weeks. So those are my main feedback, opinions on that book. The ending also sucked, so I'm not reading any more in that series either. I finally finished Stamped from the Beginning on Spotify. I forgot that I was most of the way through this, so again, it's just a pretty informative non-fiction book, mainly about America and black people and slavery and things like that. It is very heavy, which is why I listened to it, because I think I would have found that really difficult to read with my eyes. I then listened to Divergent. That was a fun time. You know, it was okay. I also listened to The Princess Diarist by Carrie Fisher. That was another really interesting one. She has such a strong voice in her non-fiction books, and it was really nice as well. Like, she actually narrated this, so I think, even though I don't really give a shit about Star Wars, I do really enjoy stuff about Hollywood and acting and things like that, because that was a really big dream I had back in the day, maybe kind of still low-key. So I find generally any books with that as like a plot really interesting. That leads quite well into the next read I listened to, Someday Someday Maybe by Lauren Graham, who is Lorelai Gilmore, the mum. And she's very similar to that character for a start. But yeah, Someday Someday Maybe is a heavily real life influenced fiction novel about, you know, like some of the fun retro days of what it was like to be like a working actor in the 90s. So I really enjoyed that because it's so different to what it's like today, and it's also just like a fun little kind of rom-com-y vibes. So you know, if you need something that's not too heavy mentally, emotionally, this is a great one. Drama, literally, as well as like socially. Yeah, just a really good time. Really enjoyed that book. I then listened to The Hunting Party, which I heavily regret just because they demonized BPD at the end. Otherwise, it would have been a pretty good read, but fuck that author. I then read this graphic novel slash manga with NetGalley, Tomorrow Make Me Yours, which is a romance novel. I always feel like I get duped by these because I think romance in like a plot way and not in like a plot way. So I think, oh cool, like cute little romance for these high school students. No, 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 it's not. And also everything just happened too quickly, so wasn't satisfying in a plot way or in a way. I think it would have been more fun if it had been stretched out over a few books, like a series, but I don't know. Are romance manga more one-shot these days? I have no idea. Is that a thing? I then listened to Insurgent, which was also fine and a good time. You know, I have really don't have much feedback on that. I then read from NetGalley Melanie Murphy's Glass Houses, which I did a whole video on, so I won't discuss that anymore. This next one's a bit of a surprise. Okay, so I listened to Revolution by Russell Brand. Number one, this was published in 2014. And it feels like no time has gone past, because it's all about fucking politics in the UK and generally the world as well. But oh my god, it's like nothing has improved in the last 8 years. Can't count, I'm gay. 2022, 2014, that's 8 in it. So that's number one, Startler. Number two, Startler, is that I read anything by Russell Brand anyway, because that man has not exactly been the best influence on anything, but he very openly admits that in this book repeatedly. He also admits that he is not an expert, but he does give quite a decent like intro to a lot of different sociological and philosophical ideas. Like he literally talks about communism and Karl Marx and shit like that in a way that's kind of easy to understand, and also he applies a lot of these things to himself and his past experiences, which helps give better context to how and why these things would work better generally. So yeah, weird one, but actually highly recommend. I also finished a Gossip Girl book. I still have a couple books left in the series, so I can't be asked to talk about it, to be honest. I think the main thing for me is that it's just the same love triangle happening over and over again, and everyone, it's Blair, Nate and Serena. Nate just keeps cheating on one of the girls with the other girl all the time. But this is like the kind of almost final book where Blair is going off to Yale, Nate is running away off to sea. He's literally just going to go be a sailor because he fucked up all of his school marks. And Serena's going to be a Hollywood actress, basically, because she's filming another film. I don't know. And then everyone else is off doing their own other things. It's kind of weird because everyone's a lot more separate in the books than in the TV show. And everything is quite different. Yeah, then I listened to Girl, Woman, Other because I picked up a physical copy in a charity shop recently. I'm not going to lie, I'm very bad with names. So when everything was sort of wrapped up in the last chapter of the book, because this is like a story of many different people's stories, and it's supposed to show you how everyone's connected in that last chapter. Some of them I could recognise, mainly based on the information provided, but oh my god, there are so many people mentioned that I'm not going to lie, I don't know how half of them are connected at all. But it was a really great book otherwise. Has a lot of heavy topics in it, like domestic abuse, manipulation, generally abusive relationships, racism, homophobia, transphobia, things like that, you know, all the fun stuff. But it's a good read, so I do recommend it. I also listened to The Great Gatsby, just so I could finally get it off of my currently reading list. And it was fine. I think it's one of the few classics I feel like I can say, yes, I enjoyed that and I understood what the fuck was happening. Because so many classics are just in a language I don't vibe with at all. I've seen the film, you know, the newer one with Leonardo DiCaprio and Tobey Maguire. So I know what happens basically, but I just wanted to actually read it. I don't really feel here or there about it, to be honest. Just confirms that I feel like Nick Calloway is kind of bisexual. And one day I will write my version now that they are not in copyright anymore. I then listened to This Is Not a Drill by the Extinction Rebellion group. So it's a book of essays by different people who have worked with Extinction Rebellion on climate crisis activism. This was also included in a recent Casualty episode where, yeah, that's funny. So I have a lot of thoughts and feelings about XR generally, which are not particularly positive, but I think it was one of those books that is quite useful to read when it comes to learning a bit more about activism and things like that. Because I mean, low-key, they were straight up, like, one of the writers was straight up bragging about being arrested and how well they were being treated in custody by police. So how much do you want to put bets down that was a white lady? So yeah, I feel like a lot of it was interesting, but there was definitely like just a very ignorant statements being made that come from a very privileged standpoint of existence. I then listened to The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. I had to wait ages for this book to become available to listen to, and it lives up to all the hype. But I am incredibly mad because I had no idea this book was what it was. Obviously, I know that she has 7 husbands, but literally nobody sold me on this at all. It's a very old Hollywood vibe. Evelyn becomes this incredibly famous actress from nowhere and nothing, and half of her marriages are for PR, half of them are to act as a beard while she's off being gay, and mainly she's pining after one woman, but also living her best queer life, having a gay husband and having a kid together. But basically it's all in the point of view of she's in her 70s, everyone in her life has died, so she wants someone to write her memoir, and you find out right at the end why she's chosen this particular writer to write her memoir. For I think the second half of the book, there's this sort of thing hanging over your head because Evelyn's like, no, I'm a really bad person. I'm a bad person. You just don't know it yet. You just don't know how much of a bad person I am. And I was listening to the book and, you know, all the things that were happening. I was like, oh, is that it? Is that why she's a bad person? And then they literally tell you at the very last second why what she did was so bad and would be seen as so bad in the journalist's point of view. Makes sense, but I was also just like, what the fuck? Because I was like sitting through it like, I'm not surprised by any of that, but you know, I was also like, you know, vibes, do what you gotta do. And then the ending, I was like, but yeah, so if someone had sold this to me, I would have read this a lot sooner, because I think this came out in 2017. You know, the fact that it's a fun Hollywood story kind of vibes, but also everyone's gay, basically. I think it's a book I will read again, and I will probably buy a physical copy of that one, because it was just so, like, just not what I was expecting at all. And then I've just recently finished listening to the audiobook of The Perks of Being a Wallflower. So I'd wanted to reread this because I've been going through trauma therapy in the last couple of years. And I read this some point in my teen years, probably after the film came out in 2012. So I think I must have read it around then. And I think I read it again because I wrote an essay on that and the film for my course in my first year at uni, I think. So that was 2015. So yeah, it's been quite a few years since then, obviously. I've done a lot of work on myself and see myself very differently now to back then. and I really enjoyed the film and the book.
Yep, minus Emma Watson's horrendous accent. It was so bad. And also minus Ezra Miller, because fuck that person. Jesus Christ.
Low key, listening to it, I was like, oh shit. I was like, Charlie's autistic. Yeah, I just read it. I was listening to it and I was like, this kid is autistic. I was like, no wonder why I related to him so fucking much. He is autistic. So, you know, that's where I'm at. That is where I am at now. So that is, yeah, 32 books so far in 2022. I think I read like 81 books last year. So I do plan to try and like pick up some more reading. I have been really enjoying listening to audiobooks when I've been out doing my gardening and stuff. So that will probably be what I'm doing at the moment. I've just kind of found it a lot easier to digest books audibly rather than reading them. Something to do with the ADHD meds, but also my life is a mess all the time, and it's just easier to listen at the moment to the story rather than sitting and reading and that being the one and only activity I do. So that's what I'm doing at the moment, is I'm just listening to a lot of audiobooks. I'm trying to find as many books that I own physically to listen to as an audiobook, and then I can decide if I want to keep the books or not. Not going super well. Not many have been have come up. So yeah, I don't know what my next read is at the moment. Really can't decide what I want to listen to. So yeah, I don't know. I have no idea. That's my first. What? Everything's just dirty when you've been doing gardening. Even though I literally have a wash at the end of every day I do gardening, I'm still just finding dirt in weird places. Leave a like on this video. Let me know in the comments if you want to see more book content from me, or if you're okay with it being kind of sporadic and, you know, maybe do like a 6 monthly reading update, and then the occasional more specific things like the one book reading vlog, or, you know, whatever. Let me know what you want to see. What do you want to see? Let me know. Okay, happy Disability Pride. Pay me money because I'm disabled. You know, out of all the times to support me, give me a little bit of extra support this July. That includes doing the free things of liking, subscribing, leaving a comment and sharing my videos. Subscribe to the channel if you want to see more of me. I do talk about a range of topics: sexuality, gender, disability overall, and how they intersect with each other. I have so many videos already up of plenty of things like that if you want to go and have a look and see what else I've talked about. From ADHD meds to Takayasu's flares and Crohn's disease diagnoses and
mental illness and trauma, you know, all sorts.
But I would really appreciate it if you did do that. Thanks. Yeah, so that's it for today. I will see you next week. Bye.